I need to share something urgent with you today, something that could dramatically alter your cognitive future or that of someone you love. As a neurologist who has specialized in age-related cognitive disorders for over 3 decades, I've watched with growing concern as a critical connection between two common conditions continues to be dangerously overlooked by both the public and many healthcare providers. The relationship between hearing loss and dementia represents one of the most significant yet underappreciated health connections affecting adults over 70. What alarms me most is not just the strength of this connection, which has now been documented in multiple large-scale studies, but how frequently it goes unaddressed until irreversible damage has occurred. Let me be clear from the outset. Moderate hearing loss doubles your risk of developing dementia. Severe hearing loss increases that risk fivefold. These aren't speculative numbers or preliminary findings. They represent consensus conclusions from multiple longitudinal studies following thousands of older adults over many years. Yet despite this robust evidence, fewer than 20% of adults with age-related hearing loss receive appropriate intervention. Consider Charles, a 73-year-old retired accountant I met 4 years ago. Charles had gradually started withdrawing from social gatherings, citing that restaurants and family events had simply become too noisy to enjoy. His wife noticed he had begun turning the television volume uncomfortably loud and frequently asked people to repeat themselves. Despite these classic signs of hearing loss, Charles resisted getting his hearing checked, insisting his hearing was good enough and that others simply mumbled too much. By the time Charles came to my clinic, he wasn't there about his hearing. He was there because his family had noticed alarming memory changes and confusion that had developed over the previous 2 years. Our comprehensive evaluation revealed not only significant untreated hearing loss, but also moderate cognitive impairment that might have been prevented or at least significantly delayed had his hearing loss been addressed years earlier. Charles's story is not unique. I've witnessed this pattern hundreds of times. Patients and families focusing exclusively on memory symptoms while overlooking the hearing loss that may have been silently contributing to cognitive decline for years. This oversight occurs because most people, including many healthcare providers, remain unaware of the powerful ways hearing loss can damage the brain over time. The implications couldn't be more serious. Research indicates that addressing hearing loss could potentially prevent up to 8% of dementia cases worldwide, approximately 800,000 cases annually. For comparison, that's more than could be prevented by controlling hypertension or diabetes. Yet hearing health receives only a fraction of the attention given to these other risk factors. Today, I'm going to share with you the 5 critical ways hearing loss damages your brain and accelerates cognitive decline after age 70. Understanding these pathways isn't just academic. It could be the difference between maintaining your cognitive independence throughout your later years or facing a devastating diagnosis that might have been delayed or even prevented. Some of what I'll share may challenge conventional wisdom or contradict what you've been told by well-meaning but uninformed sources. I ask only that you consider this information with an open mind. Your cognitive future, or that of someone you love, may depend on it. If you find this information valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel for more evidence-based guidance on protecting brain health as you age. Your support helps us reach more seniors with this vital information. Let's begin with the first and perhaps most damaging way hearing loss affects your brain, one that starts a cascade of neural changes long before any memory problems become apparent. The first critical way hearing loss damages your brain is through what neuroscientists call accelerated brain atrophy, particularly in regions crucial for processing sound, language, memory, and sensory integration. This isn't just a theory. It's a measurable, visible change that occurs more rapidly in the brains of people with untreated hearing loss. The common misconception is that hearing happens entirely in your ears, when in fact, your ears are merely collection devices. It's your brain that actually hears by processing and interpreting sound signals. When those signals become degraded due to hearing loss, your brain doesn't just passively receive less information. It undergoes physical and functional reorganization that can have devastating consequences over time. Consider Margaret, 76, who participated in a longitudinal brain imaging study at our research center. Margaret had moderate, untreated hearing loss for approximately 7 years before joining our study. Over the 3-year observation period, her brain scans showed approximately 1.3% greater loss of gray matter volume per year compared to age-matched participants with normal hearing, with disproportionate atrophy in the temporal lobes, which process sound and language, and the hippocampus, which is central to memory formation. What's truly alarming about these findings is their progressive nature. Using advanced brain imaging techniques, researchers at Johns Hopkins University found that people with untreated hearing loss lose an additional cubic centimeter of brain tissue annually compared to those with normal hearing. This accelerated atrophy follows a predictable pattern, beginning in auditory processing regions but gradually extending to areas responsible for memory, language, and executive function. The scientific explanation is both straightforward and concerning. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, works both for and against you in cases of sensory loss. When consistent, clean auditory signals stop arriving from the ears, the brain gradually reassigns underutilized auditory processing resources to other sensory systems. While this shows the brain's remarkable adaptability, it comes at a steep cost. These neuroplastic changes appear to be extremely difficult to reverse once established, even if hearing is later corrected with hearing aids or cochlear implants. For Margaret, addressing her hearing loss did slow the rate of brain atrophy in subsequent years, but it couldn't fully restore the neural architecture that had already been lost. This underscores the urgent message neurologists have been emphasizing. When it comes to hearing loss and brain health, early intervention is absolutely crucial. The implications extend far beyond simple sound perception. These structural brain changes correlate directly with cognitive function. Each additional 10 decibels of hearing loss is associated with an incremental decline in cognitive performance equivalent to approximately 3.6 years of cognitive aging. For someone with moderate to severe hearing loss, that's like adding more than a decade of cognitive aging beyond their chronological age. What makes this particularly concerning is that this accelerated brain atrophy begins long before any subjective awareness of cognitive decline, typically years or even a decade before memory symptoms become apparent to the individual or their family members. By the time cognitive symptoms emerge, significant and potentially irreversible brain changes have already occurred. If you've noticed changes in your hearing, or if family members have commented on your television volume or need for repetition, I strongly urge you to get a proper hearing evaluation without delay. Modern hearing testing is non-invasive, painless, and can identify problems early when intervention is most effective for preserving brain structure and function. Don't wait until you find the hearing loss bad enough to address. From a neurological perspective, that approach may sacrifice precious cognitive reserve that cannot be fully recovered. Remember, your brain's architecture actively responds to sensory input or its absence. When you address hearing loss, you're not just improving communication. You're providing your brain with the sensory stimulation it requires to maintain its structural integrity. If you're finding this information valuable, please consider giving this video a thumbs up to help others discover this critical content. Now let's examine the second major pathway through which hearing loss damages your brain and accelerates cognitive decline. The second critical way hearing loss damages your brain is through what neuroscientists identify as cognitive overload, a process that exhausts your neural resources by forcing your brain to divert enormous energy to the simple act of understanding speech. This constant reallocation of mental resources has far-reaching consequences that extend far beyond mere conversation. The dangerous misconception is that the primary impact of hearing loss is simply missing information. The reality is far more complex and insidious. Hearing loss forces your brain into a state of constant cognitive strain that depletes resources needed for other essential functions like memory formation, attention, and processing speed. Consider Thomas, 79, who came to our clinic reporting unusual fatigue after social gatherings, but minimal concern about his hearing. "I can hear people fine if they speak clearly," he insisted, "but I'm exhausted after an hour of conversation." Comprehensive testing revealed moderate hearing loss in both ears, particularly in the frequency ranges crucial for speech discrimination. What Thomas had attributed to normal aging fatigue was actually cognitive overload from the immense effort his brain was expending to fill in the gaps of conversations he wasn't fully hearing. The science behind this is compelling. Functional MRI studies reveal that people with even mild hearing loss show increased activation in frontal and prefrontal cortical areas when listening to speech, regions normally reserved for higher-level cognitive processing rather than basic auditory perception. Essentially, as hearing becomes impaired, your brain compensates by recruiting cognitive resources not ordinarily required for listening. This forced reallocation comes at a significant cost. The brain has a finite energy budget, utilizing approximately 20% of your body's total energy, despite comprising only 2% of your body weight. When an excessive portion of this energy is diverted to the formerly effortless task of understanding speech, other cognitive functions inevitably suffer. It's like running sophisticated computer software on a system where basic operations are consuming most of the processing power. For Thomas, addressing his hearing loss with properly fitted hearing aids produced results that extended far beyond improved hearing. I hadn't realized how much mental energy I was using just to follow conversations, he reported 3 months after beginning treatment. Not only can I hear better, but I've noticed I'm less forgetful and can concentrate much longer on other tasks without feeling mentally drained. This cognitive reallocation explains a paradoxical finding that confused researchers for years. Hearing loss seems to affect memory even for visual information and nonverbal tasks that don't ostensibly require hearing. The explanation lies in this resource depletion model. When cognitive resources are continuously diverted to the effortful task of hearing, fewer resources remain available for encoding new memories, maintaining attention, or processing information of any kind. Particularly concerning is how this cognitive overload affects your brain in real time during social interactions. Studies using pupillometry, which measures cognitive effort through pupil dilation, show that individuals with hearing loss exhibit significantly greater pupil dilation when listening to speech, indicating substantially higher cognitive load. This increased effort often leads to what audiologists call listening fatigue, a state of mental exhaustion that prompts many people with hearing loss to withdraw from social engagement entirely, creating a secondary pathway to cognitive decline through isolation. If you find yourself unusually tired after social gatherings, often asking people to repeat themselves, or struggling to follow conversations in noisy environments, these aren't simply inconveniences to endure. They're warning signs of a brain under cognitive strain that warrants immediate attention. Modern hearing technology can significantly reduce this cognitive burden, allowing your brain to reallocate resources to the memory, attention, and processing functions crucial for cognitive health. Remember, when you address hearing loss, you're not just improving communication. You're liberating cognitive resources that are essential for maintaining overall brain function and protecting against cognitive decline. If you're still watching and finding these insights valuable, please type 2 in the comments to let me know this information is helping you. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that addresses the critical connection between sensory health and cognitive function. Now let's examine the third major pathway through which hearing loss accelerates cognitive decline after 70. The third critical way hearing loss damages your brain is through what researchers call social isolation and deprivation, a progressive withdrawal from interpersonal engagement that deprives your brain of crucial stimulation necessary for cognitive health. This pathway is particularly insidious because it develops gradually and is often rationalized as a preference change rather than recognized as a response to communication difficulties. The dangerous misconception is that social withdrawal among older adults with hearing loss represents a simple preference shift or personality change with aging. The neurological reality is far more concerning. This withdrawal often directly results from communication difficulties and the cognitive fatigue we discussed earlier, creating a pattern of social deprivation that has profound effects on brain health. Consider Eleanor, 81, who gradually stopped attending her weekly bridge club, reduced participation in church activities, and began declining family dinner invitations. "It's just too noisy to enjoy those gatherings anymore," she explained to her concerned daughter. "I prefer quieter activities now." What appeared as a simple preference change was actually Eleanor's adaptation to untreated hearing loss that had made social settings increasingly challenging and exhausting. The science connecting social engagement to brain health is robust and concerning. Multiple longitudinal studies show that socially integrated adults have a 50% reduced risk of dementia compared to those who are isolated. Even more tellingly, research from the University of Michigan found that social isolation accelerates cognitive decline at nearly twice the rate seen in socially engaged seniors, with hearing loss being one of the strongest predictors of which seniors will become isolated. Here's why this happens. Human brains evolved as fundamentally social organs, requiring regular interpersonal stimulation to maintain optimal function. Conversation isn't merely a pleasurable activity. It provides complex cognitive stimulation involving listening, processing, formulating responses, tracking nonverbal cues, and engaging multiple memory systems simultaneously. When hearing loss makes conversation difficult or exhausting, many seniors begin avoiding these situations, inadvertently depriving their brains of this essential form of cognitive exercise. The neurological impact is measurable. PET scans of socially isolated older adults show reduced metabolic activity in frontal and temporal regions, crucial for language processing, social cognition, and memory formation. This reduced activity correlates directly with accelerated cognitive decline, creating a devastating cycle. Hearing loss leads to social withdrawal, which further compromises cognitive function, which makes social interaction even more challenging. For Eleanor, addressing her moderate hearing loss with properly fitted hearing aids broke this cycle in multiple ways. Not only could she hear conversations more clearly with less effort, but the reduced cognitive load allowed her to once again enjoy social gatherings without exhaustion. "I hadn't realized how much I'd withdrawn," she acknowledged 6 months after beginning treatment. "I thought I was simply changing preferences, but now I recognize I was avoiding situations that had become too difficult." What makes this pathway particularly dangerous is how easily families and even healthcare providers miss or misinterpret it. Social withdrawal due to hearing difficulties is rarely announced or explicitly linked to hearing by the person experiencing it. Instead, it's typically explained away with plausible-sounding alternatives: fatigue, transportation difficulties, changing interests, or a preference for quieter activities. These explanations seem reasonable in isolation, making it easy to overlook the underlying hearing loss driving the behavior change. If you've noticed yourself or a loved one becoming more socially withdrawn, particularly from situations involving group conversations, background noise, or unfamiliar speakers, consider this a red flag warning hearing evaluation. Don't accept social disengagement as an inevitable part of aging. It often represents an addressable response to sensory changes that, left untreated, creates significant additional risk for cognitive decline. Remember, social engagement isn't a luxury for your brain. It's a necessity. When hearing loss compromises your ability to participate comfortably in social interaction, addressing that sensory deficit helps maintain the neural stimulation critical for cognitive resilience. If you found this information helpful, please consider sharing this video with others who might benefit from understanding this crucial connection. Now let's examine the fourth major pathway through which hearing loss accelerates cognitive decline. The fourth critical way hearing loss damages your brain is through what neuroscientists identify as reduced auditory stimulation, a process that progressively diminishes the quantity and quality of neural input your brain receives, ultimately contributing to diminished cognitive function through sensory deprivation. The common misconception is that the brain's need for sensory stimulation diminishes with age, making sensory losses less consequential in later years. The neurological reality is precisely the opposite. Adequate sensory stimulation becomes increasingly important for maintaining cognitive function as you age, with hearing providing some of the most continuous and complex input your brain receives. Consider William, 77, who gradually began limiting his environments to quieter, more controlled settings as his hearing declined. Though still physically active, he stopped attending concerts he previously enjoyed, avoided crowded restaurants, and even rearranged his daily walk to avoid busier streets with more ambient sound. "I prefer peace and quiet now," he explained when asked about these changes. What William didn't realize was that this self-imposed auditory restriction was significantly reducing the sensory stimulation his brain required to maintain optimal function. The science here is both straightforward and concerning. Your brain requires consistent, varied sensory input to maintain its neural networks and processing capabilities. Hearing provides perhaps the most continuous stream of such input, even when you're not consciously focused on listening. Background conversations, environmental sounds, music, and ambient noise all provide valuable stimulation that helps maintain the auditory cortex and its connections to other brain regions. When hearing loss progressively reduces this stimulation, the consequences extend far beyond the auditory system itself. Neuroimaging studies demonstrate that prolonged auditory deprivation results in reduced density of gray matter in multiple brain regions and diminished integrity of white matter tracts connecting different neural areas. These changes correlate directly with declining performance on cognitive tasks, even those that don't explicitly involve hearing. What makes this pathway particularly insidious is that the brain doesn't send obvious distress signals when it's receiving inadequate auditory stimulation. Unlike hunger or thirst, which produce clear, uncomfortable sensations, sensory deprivation creates no immediate discomfort that might motivate corrective action. Instead, the effects accumulate silently over months and years, manifesting eventually as accelerated cognitive decline without any obvious cause. For William, addressing his moderate hearing loss with properly fitted hearing aids provided a level of auditory stimulation he hadn't experienced in years. "I had no idea how much I was missing," he reported after 3 months of treatment. "It's not just that I can hear conversations better. I'm noticing birds again, hearing details in music I'd forgotten existed, and generally feeling more engaged with the world around me." This increased engagement represents far more than improved quality of life. It reflects the restoration of crucial neural stimulation that helps maintain cognitive function. Research from the University of Washington demonstrated that properly fitted hearing aids increase activity in previously underutilized regions of the auditory cortex within weeks of consistent use, with associated improvements in cognitive measures of attention, processing speed, and working memory. The implications are clear. Adequate auditory stimulation isn't optional for brain health. It's essential. When hearing loss reduces this stimulation, addressing the sensory deficit helps ensure your brain receives the input it needs to maintain optimal function. If you've noticed yourself or a loved one increasingly preferring quieter environments, having difficulty distinguishing sounds in complex auditory environments, or no longer enjoying previously pleasurable auditory experiences like music or nature sounds, these changes warrant professional hearing evaluation. Don't accept diminished auditory engagement as an inevitable part of aging. It often represents an addressable condition that, left untreated, accelerates cognitive decline. Remember, your brain needs regular, varied sensory input to maintain its function. When you address hearing loss, you're not just improving sound perception, you're providing essential stimulation that helps preserve cognitive abilities throughout your later years. If you're still watching and finding these insights valuable, please comment 4 below to let me know this information is helping you. Your feedback guides our future content development. Now let's examine the 5th and final major pathway through which hearing loss contributes to cognitive decline after 70. The 5th and perhaps most concerning way hearing loss damages your brain is through what researchers have identified as neuropathological acceleration, a process by which hearing impairment appears to directly accelerate the development and progression of the brain changes associated with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. The dangerous misconception is that hearing loss and dementia are entirely separate conditions that merely happen to co-occur in older adults. The neurobiological reality is far more alarming. Mounting evidence suggests hearing loss may directly influence the underlying disease processes that lead to dementia, potentially triggering or accelerating pathological changes in vulnerable brains. Consider Helen, 83, who participated in our center's brain donation program. Helen had lived with untreated moderate hearing loss for approximately 12 years before developing symptoms of Alzheimer's disease at age 78. Post-mortem examination of her brain tissue revealed not only the amyloid plaques and tau tangles characteristic of Alzheimer's, but also a pattern of neurodegeneration that aligned precisely with the auditory neural pathways affected by her hearing loss, suggesting a direct relationship between these conditions. The science here is both emerging and concerning. Recent studies using PET imaging to detect amyloid and tau proteins, the hallmarks of Alzheimer's pathology, found that older adults with hearing loss showed greater accumulation of these proteins in temporal lobe regions compared to those with normal hearing, even after controlling for age and other risk factors. This suggests hearing loss may either directly contribute to the development of these pathological proteins or reduce the brain's ability to clear them effectively. Multiple mechanisms may explain this connection. First, the increased cognitive load and resource depletion we discussed earlier may reduce the brain's resilience against developing pathology. Second, reduced social engagement and sensory stimulation may decrease cognitive reserve that would otherwise help compensate for early pathological changes. Third, and perhaps most directly, the neural stress and inflammation associated with reorganizing auditory pathways may trigger or exacerbate inflammatory processes that contribute to neurodegeneration. What makes this pathway particularly concerning is its potential implications for prevention. If hearing loss directly contributes to the neuropathological processes underlying dementia, then addressing hearing impairment might not merely slow cognitive decline, it might actually reduce the risk of developing dementia pathology in the first place. Emerging research supports this possibility. A breakthrough 2020 study published in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia followed nearly 2,500 older adults over 8 years, finding that consistent use of hearing aids was associated with a 19% reduction in long-term cognitive decline. Even more telling, those who addressed their hearing loss showed cognitive trajectories more similar to people without hearing impairment than to peers with untreated hearing loss. For individuals like Helen, this research arrives too late. But for the millions of adults currently living with untreated hearing loss, it offers a crucial opportunity for intervention that might significantly alter their cognitive future. The message from current research couldn't be clearer. Addressing hearing loss should be considered not merely a quality of life issue, but a brain health imperative. If you or a loved one has hearing loss, even if it seems mild or manageable, I strongly urge you to consult with an audiologist about appropriate interventions. Modern hearing technology has advanced dramatically, with devices that are virtually invisible, automatically adjust to different environments, and provide clear sound even in challenging situations. Many now connect wirelessly to phones and televisions, making them easier to use than ever before. Remember, the connection between hearing loss and dementia isn't simply about both conditions becoming more common with age. These conditions appear to be mechanistically linked, with hearing loss potentially driving the very brain changes that lead to cognitive decline. Addressing hearing health represents one of the most accessible and potentially effective ways to protect your cognitive future. Having examined all 5 critical pathways through which hearing loss contributes to cognitive decline, let's discuss what actions you should take to protect yourself or your loved ones. First and most importantly, if you're over 70, get your hearing tested annually, even if you don't think you have significant hearing problems. Unlike vision changes, which are typically obvious to the person experiencing them, hearing loss often develops so gradually that internal calibration adjusts, making it difficult to recognize from the inside. Many people with measurable hearing loss, sufficient to affect brain health, report their hearing as fine or only having trouble in specific situations. Second, if hearing loss is identified, address it promptly rather than waiting until it becomes more severe. The research is clear that earlier intervention produces better outcomes for both hearing and cognitive health. Modern hearing aids are more effective, comfortable, and discreet than ever before, with many styles that sit completely inside the ear canal, virtually invisible to others. Third, understand that adapting to hearing technology requires some patience and persistence. Your brain needs time to readjust to receiving auditory information it's been missing, which can initially feel overwhelming. Most audiologists recommend a gradual acclimatization period, wearing the devices for increasing amounts of time each day as your brain adapts. This adjustment period is a small price to pay for the potential cognitive benefits. Fourth, recognize that addressing hearing loss involves more than just amplifying sound. The most effective approach combines appropriate technology with communication strategies, environmental modifications, and sometimes auditory training exercises to help your brain relearn optimal processing of sound information. Work with hearing healthcare providers who take this comprehensive approach rather than simply selling devices. Fifth, if cost is a concern, explore the growing number of resources available to help make hearing treatment more accessible. Some Medicare Advantage plans now cover hearing aids, and various nonprofit organizations provide assistance for those with financial limitations. The potential cognitive benefits make hearing intervention one of the most cost-effective preventive health measures available. For families supporting older adults who resist addressing hearing problems, approach the subject with patience and focus on the brain health aspects rather than simply communication improvement. Many seniors who dismiss hearing aids as unnecessary for social reasons become more receptive when they understand the cognitive implications of untreated hearing loss. The evidence we've discussed today represents a fundamental shift in how we should think about hearing health, not as an isolated sensory concern, but as a critical factor in maintaining brain function throughout our later years. While no single intervention can guarantee prevention of dementia, addressing hearing loss represents one of the most accessible and potentially effective steps you can take to protect cognitive health after 70. Thank you for taking the time to understand this crucial connection between hearing and brain health. If you found this information valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with others who might benefit. Your support helps us continue providing evidence-based guidance on protecting cognitive function as we age. Remember, your cognitive future is not predetermined by age alone. By understanding and addressing modifiable risk factors, like hearing loss, you take an active role in protecting your most precious asset, your mind, for years to come.